All right, hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of Science Class. This week we've been learning all about the biosphere, which is all of the living things on Earth. The plants, the animals. Oh, let's go back to that. And also the fungi and the bacteria. So today we are going to focus mostly on insects and insect life cycles. Insects are animals, but they're a specific type of animal. So what is an insect? How can we recognize an insect? Well, you guys already know a lot of different insects, but let's talk about what they all have in common. So first of all, insects are invertebrates. That means they do not have backbones or any vertebra. Insects have 3 body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. So the head on top, obviously, thorax being the middle chest piece, and then the abdomen is that bottom part of the insect. And then all insects have 6 legs. So they're invertebrates with 3 body sections and 6 legs. That's what makes an insect an insect. And there are so many different types, millions of different species of insects. Here's just a few that you're familiar with: bees, butterflies, different kinds of beetles, moths, wasps, all the creepy crawly critters. Well, most of them. Spiders don't count as insects. And other things like millipedes and centipedes are not insects. Only the creepy crawlies with 6 legs. Okay, so we're already on to our first question on your Google form. Go ahead and pause the video and go to your form and answer question number 1. Name 3 insects that you know of. 3 insects that you are already familiar with. Okie dokie. And I wish we could do a whip around. I'm still getting used to just teaching to the screen instead of teaching to a whole room full of students. It's not quite the same energy. So wishing we could do a whip around and I could hear all your amazing suggestions of the insects that you're thinking of. But I'll just have to go and read the Google form. Hopefully you wrote 3 insects in the Google form. And we're moving on. So not all insects have the same life cycle. There's 2 categories, basically. Insects that go through complete metamorphosis and insects which go through incomplete metamorphosis. Is this ringing a bell? So the main difference between them is that complete metamorphosis has 4 stages and incomplete metamorphosis has technically 3 stages. So what is metamorphosis? Metamorphosis. How many syllables in that word? Count it out for me. That's right. Metamorphosis. We got 5 syllables. It's a big word, and this is something that all insects have in common. What does it mean? Metamorphosis, and that middle section inside of metamorphosis, if we break it down, that root, morph, means change. So you guys know I always bring it down to, if we are trying to figure out what a word means, we always look at the prefixes, the suffixes, and the roots, and see if we can piece together the meaning of the word based on things that we already know. So this root, morph, means change, like Mighty Morphin or what are they called? Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, right? Morphin means that they change form. So metamorphosis is a big change or a transformation. So all insects go through this. They go through a big change throughout their life cycle. So pause the video. Let's go to question number 2 on the Google form. What is metamorphosis in general? What is metamorphosis? So hopefully you wrote for me, metamorphosis is a big change or a big transformation, right? Humans can go through this too, right? Metamorphosis just means a transformation. So if you've ever gone through any kind of drastic change in your life, you could say that you've also been through a metamorphosis. But when we're talking about metamorphosis in specific scientific terms, we're referring to an insect life cycle. So let's start with complete metamorphosis. And like I said, complete metamorphosis has 4 stages. So incomplete has only 3, but complete has 4 stages. They are egg, larva, pupa, then adult. 4 stages, and we'll break it down and talk about what each of these stages means. Because it's a life cycle, and cycles are things that repeat and go over and over again, this life cycle also does the same thing. It also repeats over and over again. So after we get to adults are the ones who are capable of laying eggs and starting the life cycle over again. So then it goes, an egg will hatch and grow into a larva. The larva will transform into a pupa, and the pupa emerges as an adult. And it goes over and over and over again. Egg, larva, pupa, adult. Okay, and this is particular just to insects. This is the way insects go through life. Okay, so before we break down each of those stages, pause the video and go to question number 3. What are the 4 stages of complete metamorphosis? What are they? Just list them in order for me, please. And hopefully you listed egg, larva, pupa, adult. Good job. Okay, so let's start with egg. What is an egg? Well, it might be obvious to you, but let's talk about what specifically do insect eggs look like. So insect eggs are teeny, teeny tiny, like a grain of rice or like a sesame seed. They look different, right? Just like we learned yesterday how seeds have different shapes and sizes. Same with eggs. Eggs have different shapes and sizes and colors. And often when insects lay them, they will lay many at one time. Okay, and that's because they're so vulnerable, right? And insect parents usually don't hang around and guard their eggs the same way that mammals and birds do. So they have to lay a lot at one time to give their babies the best chance of survival, right? They're like, well, hopefully one of you survives out of the thousands of you, right? So here are some, that might be a little morbid, but that's nature. So here are some pictures of some itty bitty insect eggs. And these are really closely zoomed in, but you can use this leaf as sort of a size reference for you, right? These are all sitting in the cracks and crevices of leaves mostly. And this one looks like it's in dirt, this little cluster. So you can see they're laid in these little clumps, sometimes just a dozen, sometimes 20 or 30. Sometimes it looks like 100 or so, but they're all really little, teeny tiny eggs. Okay, so that's the first stage. And then what hatches out of that egg? What hatches out of the egg is a larva. And the larva is like a tiny little worm. Okay, and it says, uh-oh, where are all my body parts? Right? When a larva hatches and is born, it doesn't look like the adult insect, right? So it doesn't have its head, thorax, and abdomen. its 3 body sections. The larva doesn't have wings. The larva doesn't have its antennae. So there are a lot of things that the larva is missing that it will need to grow before it can become a full-grown adult, or a full-blown adult. And the larva's main job after it hatches out of the egg is it's going to eat and eat and eat and eat. Have you read the story, The Hungry Caterpillar? Well, a caterpillar is a larva. It's just another name for a larva. Or specifically, it's the larva of a butterfly, right? And because the caterpillar is a larva, its job is to eat and eat and eat and get as big as it can, right? That's all it's doing all throughout the day. It won't be until the next stage, the pupa stage, that larva or that caterpillar starts to focus on growing other parts of its body. So right now in the larva stage, the second stage, it's just like a little wiggly worm, just eating and eating and eating and growing its little worm body. Oops, let's go back. Here are some pictures of some larvae. So again, they're hatching out of those teeny tiny eggs. So they're starting out usually really, really small. And then they're growing and growing and growing as they eat. And most larvae just eat plants. A lot of times a larva's first meal will be its actual egg, the eggshell or the egg casing. It'll just go ahead and munch that right away as its first meal because nature doesn't like to waste anything, right? So might as well make use of that egg now that the larva's hatched from it. Okay, so you can see they all kind of, they look different, but they all kind of look like a little worm. A couple caterpillars in there. Some of them are prettier than others. Okay, so that's our second stage, the larva. And then third we have pupa. So after the larva has eaten and eaten and eaten, usually for several weeks, finally it decides to go into the pupa stage. So this is kind of like the teenage stage. This is the insect getting ready to become an adult. So in the pupa stage, the larva usually I say that they go into their room, kind of like a teenager. This is where they're going to have a major transformation. So in the pupa stage, the insect kind of shuts down for a second. They don't really eat at all, and they go into a safe place. So that looks different for different insects, but for example, a butterfly is going to build like almost like a hard shell around it called a chrysalis, which you may have seen before or may have heard of before. So a butterfly will wrap a chrysalis around itself in order to go through the hardest part of the transformation, where it grows its last body parts, its wings. So before it can really become an adult, it has to grow those wings. And in order to do that, it needs to go to a safe place. So the pupa stage is when the insect hides away. Okay, for a honeybee or for a wasp, that's usually inside of the hive, right? Inside a little cell or a little room inside the hive. And for other creatures, they might be burrowed underground during the pupa stage, right? But they're hidden in a safe place where they can kind of shut out the world for a while and really focus on themselves, just like teenagers do. So this is a period of major transformation and major attitude. Major-tude. No, just kidding. That's a joke. But it is a time where the pupa is trying to become an adult. Okay, so this is the major transformation, the biggest, most dramatic section of an insect's life. From my humble opinion, obviously, I am not an insect, so maybe I'm overstepping my bounds by saying that. But alas, from my perspective, it seems like a very turbulent time. So let's take a look at what some pupas look like. Boom! They're not the prettiest, but you can kind of see that the insect is starting to look like the adult stage. Okay, starting to look like the adult. So you can almost see these wings tucked in here, right? The outline of the wings that they're starting to grow. And as you can tell, I don't know if you can tell, but you can kind of see the shiny, waxy outer layer. It almost looks like these are, sculptures made of wood, or that they're carved or something. So these pupa have kind of a hard outer shell to protect the larva or the insect inside who is trying to grow its final stage. Okay? So they're really well protected during this time, and that's because they're kind of shut down. So they're not really paying attention to the outside world. So if they weren't in a protective, safe place, they would be really vulnerable to attack while they're going through this final transformation. So they try to stay safe in the pupa stage, the teenage stage. And then when they emerge out of their teenage stage, they are a full-blown adults. The adults have wings, they're able to reproduce, and they're able to mate, and they still don't pay their bills on time. Sorry, I'm full of jokes today. So the adult is the full-grown insect. Let's take a look. There you go. The insects that you know and love, the ones that you see flying around your backyard and flying in your house, those are the adults. The egg and the larva and the pupa, with the exception of, caterpillars, we usually don't really see many larvae or pupa out in the wild. Most of the insects we're seeing are going to be adults, the ones with wings, the ones who are able to fly around. So there's some adults. Okay, so let's talk about which insects go through complete metamorphosis. Right? Some go through complete and some go through incomplete. So which ones are going through these 4 stages? That would be butterflies and moths. Right, so here's the little egg. It's blown up in this picture. It would be much tinier. But egg, larva, pupa, adult. Or another way to say it, egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly. Right, so when we say egg, larva, pupa, adult, those are just the general labels for this life cycle. Some insects have more specific names for each stage, but we can just use the general terms, egg, larva, pupa, adult. Okay, so butterflies and moths, bees and wasps go through these 4 stages. So bees and wasps start as an egg, turn into the wormy larva stage, transform into the pupa, which almost looks like the adult, and then the adult. Okay, ladybugs and beetles also go through this. Flies and fleas. Ants. In this one, it looks a little interesting because you see these 3 different options for what the ant could become as an adult. So you see the egg stage, stage 1, then the larva stage, the wormy stage, then the pupa, which is almost a full-blown adult. And then after the pupa stage, the only reason there's 3 arrows is because with an ant, the ant could either become a female worker, a male worker, or a female queen. I think these are backwards actually in this graphic. I think the males are the ones who are the workers. Not sure. Anyway, but there's just different jobs for the adult, so that's why we see 3 arrows there. Okay, and then mosquitoes also. So butterflies, moths, bees, wasps, mosquitoes, ants, flies, fleas, all these different creatures, ladybugs and beetles as well, go through these 4 stages. of metamorphosis. Okay, so go ahead and pause your video and name for me 3 insects that go through complete metamorphosis. Tell me 3. Did any 3 that go through complete metamorphosis. Alright, so let's move on to the second type of insect life cycle, which is incomplete metamorphosis. Incomplete metamorphosis only has 3 stages: egg, nymph, adult. And again, it goes over and over and over again. So the adult will lay more eggs, and those eggs will hatch into nymphs, and those nymphs will grow into adults. So egg, nymph, egg, nymph, adult. Sometimes we also call a nymph a naiad. That's the word you see here. Repeat after me. Say naiad. A naiad. So a naiad is just a nymph that's born underwater. Naiad. It's quite an interesting word with that AIA combination. You know, another interesting fact is that nymphs and nymphs are also names for mythical creatures. People talk about, you might hear about nymphs and naiads in stories. They're usually beautiful women, sometimes women inside of water who live underwater, or live in the trees and live in the forests. And oftentimes they are luring sailors and soldiers into the forest or into the water, never to be heard from again. So I don't know why nymphs and naiads have the same name as mythical, beautiful ladies. But today in science class, when we're talking about naiads and nymphs, we're talking about these type of naiads and these type of nymphs. Look how cute that tiny little grasshopper nymph is. Oh, he's so cute. Okay, and then they end up as adults. So incomplete metamorphosis goes egg, nymph, adult. Or sometimes we say naiad. Only if the nymph is born underwater, like with dragonflies, for example. Okay, so pause your video. We're on question number 5. What are the 3 stages of incomplete metamorphosis? Awesome, and hopefully you said egg, nymph, adult. I would also accept egg, naiad, adult. So an egg, what is an egg? Well, same as in complete metamorphosis. They're teeny tiny little grains or seeds, and often several laid at one time. And then what is a nymph? So a nymph, different from a larva, right? When the larva is born, it does not have all of its body parts, right? A little tiny wormy larva looks a lot different than the adult version, right? A bumblebee doesn't look anything like a little tiny worm or a bee larva. Same with a butterfly. It doesn't look anything like a caterpillar, right? So the larva has to go through a complete transformation to turn into its adult self, whereas a nymph basically looks like a tiny version of the insect that it's going to become. It's just teeny, teeny, tiny. So a nymph says, oh, okay, phew. I have all my body parts. Okay, they have their 3 sections. They have their 6 legs. All they're missing are their wings. Okay, they still have to grow their wings as they grow up. That's a badge that an insect earns throughout its life. And nymphs go through several moltings. So they do things a little bit differently than a larva, right? A larva is going to eat and eat and eat and eat, and then finally shut itself away in its bedroom so that it can do its transformation. A nymph, on the other hand, is going to slowly transform over time. So they're going to do many different mini transformations called moltings. And molting is just when the insect is shedding its skin. Okay, remember we talked about how insects have exoskeletons, right? They have these hard outer skins. So as the nymph is growing and growing and growing, eventually they're getting kind of tight inside of their skin. It'd be like if you were wearing the same clothes every day all the time and your body was growing inside of those clothes. Well, eventually the clothes would be really, really tight on you, right? So in order for a nymph to be able to grow, it has to shed that layer of skin, okay, and it's kind of raw and naked for a minute, and then it grows a new exoskeleton, right? A new layer of the outer skin. So I keep saying skin, but it's really technically the exoskeleton, right? That they continue to grow. So that's how a nymph grows. And a larva does this too. A larva also has to molt in order to grow and grow and grow. That's how caterpillars get really big. The difference is that a larva doesn't look like the adult yet, whereas a nymph does. Okay, here's some pictures. Boom. So here are pictures. These are dragonfly nymphs and a praying mantis nymph. So you see how this praying mantis nymph looks basically like a praying mantis. It's got these sharp elbows, these long legs, its body has the same proportion. It's got the head, thorax, and abdomen, and these two long antennae. All it's missing are its wings, plus it's also teeny, teeny, tiny. Same with this cute little grasshopper and this cute little grasshopper nymph. Right? They look just like a grasshopper, but they're tiny. So they're going to have to shed their skin over and over and grow into a slightly larger nymph and a slightly larger nymph and a slightly larger nymph until finally they're an adult. Okay, so we will know that they're an adult when they finally grow their wings. Okay, these ones are dragonflies. I think these are the hardest to tell that they look like the adults because dragonflies' wings are a huge part of their distinction, right? That's how we distinguish them from other insects. So without their wings, it's hard to tell that they look like dragonflies. But they do. That's what a dragonfly looks like. Okay, so these are nymphs. They're basically tiny versions of the adult insects. And then when they're finally adults, they have wings, they're full grown, and, important point, they are able to reproduce and to mate. So they're able to start the life cycle all over again and make new eggs. Okay, so here are some adults. Insects, some dragonflies, some grasshoppers. These down here are termites. Okay, so you can see they look a lot like their nymph counterparts. Just bigger, shiner, brighter. Okay, glowed up, if you will. Alright, so which insects in all the insect world, which ones go through incomplete metamorphosis? Which ones go through these 3 stages? That would be dragonflies. 1. So that's the dragonfly laying eggs. I don't know if you can see in this picture right here. Right? Laying eggs underwater. Dragonfly, naiad, adult. Grasshoppers and crickets. So you can see the nymph looks just like the adults. It's just smaller and it's missing its wings. Here's another image of grasshoppers and crickets. Only 3 stages. Okay, bed bugs and lice, same thing. They hatch from a tiny egg into a nymph, into an adult. Earwigs and termites. So this is showing multiple different nymphs, right? There's still only 3 stages in the metamorphosis, but we're seeing all these pictures because it's just showing the nymph growing over time, right? So this is a nymph, this is a nymph, this is a nymph, this is a nymph. We can call all of these nymphs until this stage is the adult once it has wings. Okay, so it's not like it has 7 stages, It's still only 3 stages. Okay, so pause your video and let's answer the final question on your Google form for today. Name 3 insects that go through incomplete metamorphosis. Incomplete. Alrighty, and you could have told me dragonflies, grasshoppers, crickets, earwigs, termites, bedbugs, lice. Did I miss any? Those are the main ones. Okay, let's review really quickly. We've got complete metamorphosis, which is 4 stages. Egg, larva, pupa, adult. And then we've got incomplete metamorphosis, which is 3 stages. Say them with me. Here we go. Egg, nymph, adult. Awesome. Voila. So here we go. That's the main difference. And all insects have to go through one of these 2 processes, right? So either they're going to be born as something totally different from the adult, and they're going to have to go through a major change. That's a complete metamorphosis. Or they hatch out of that egg and they look basically like the adult, just a tiny version. Kind of like humans, right? When we are born as tiny little babies, we look a lot like our adult selves. We have all of our body parts already. We just have to get a little bit bigger and a little bit more mature, right? So same with this tiny baby grasshopper. It doesn't have to go through a total transformation and change all of its body parts. It just has to get a little bigger and then grow wings eventually. Okay, ta-da! The end. So that is all for today. You are welcome to go and take your DOL at this point. And then after you do your DOL, make sure you click View Your Score so that you can find out what level of LSAE work to work on today. Come and talk to me or send me a message or pop into the video chat if you have any questions, and I will talk to you later. Good luck, and I love you, and bye.